The air in the studio crackled with electric energy as the audience awaited the arrival of a country music legend. Carrie Underwood, the golden voice behind unforgettable hits like Before He Cheats and Jesus, Take the Wheel, was about to step onto the stage of one of the most notorious talk shows in America, The Daily Hour with Rob Malone. Rob, known for his razor-sharp tongue and his unrelenting liberal stance, was notorious for ambushing guests with pointed, sometimes even cruel questions. He had built a career on challenging celebrities and public figures, attempting to force them into uncomfortable corners. But no one had yet succeeded in taking him down, not without a fight. Tonight, however, things were different. Carrie Underwood wasn't just any guest. As the audience hushed, a hushed murmur of excitement passed through the crowd. Carrie had become an icon not just for her voice but for her unwavering principles and her ability to rise above controversy with grace. Rob's reputation for prying into the personal lives and political opinions of his guests had made this one of the most anticipated episodes in recent history. The question on everyone's mind: would Carrie allow Rob to push her buttons, or would she rise to the occasion and turn the tables in the most unexpected way? The moment she stepped on stage, the tension in the room was palpable. The talk show host, with his carefully crafted smile, had made it clear he planned to drag Carrie into an uncomfortable debate over her political views, a topic that had made headlines recently after she publicly supported a conservative candidate in a controversial election. As she took her seat, the cameras flashed, and the audience waited for the first move. Rob, ever the provocateur, wasted no time. His voice cut through the silence. "Carrie," he began, leaning in with that trademark sneer, "you've made waves recently with your outspoken support for politicians who are far from popular in Hollywood. Can you explain to us, in front of millions of viewers, why you choose to back people who stand for everything the rest of us are against?" Carrie Underwood, calm and composed, smiled softly as the audience leaned in, waiting for her response. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Rob Malone's words had struck with the precision of a scalpel, but Carrie, the professional that she was, wasn't about to let him cut too deep. The country singer straightened her posture, her eyes locking with Rob's, unflinching. She knew this moment was inevitable, yet she had prepared for it. Perhaps her entire career had prepared her for this. She leaned forward slightly, tilting her head just enough to show she was ready for the verbal sparring that lay ahead. "Rob," she began, her voice smooth yet firm, "I support who I believe can lead this country in the best direction, not just who is popular in Hollywood or who fits the mold that others expect me to follow." The room fell silent. Rob's sneer remained, but his eyes narrowed, searching for an opening. He wasn't about to give up that easily. "But don't you see, Carrie," he countered, his voice laced with sarcasm, "you're a role model for millions of young people. By supporting these politicians, you're influencing them to follow an ideology that stands against everything progress stands for. Don't you feel some responsibility for the impact you have on your fans?" Carrie's eyes flickered with a mix of calmness and a hint of challenge. She had been asked this question more times than she cared to count, but tonight, it felt different. "I believe everyone has a right to their own opinion," she replied evenly, "but at the end of the day, I stand by my beliefs. I'm not trying to force my views onto anyone, Rob. I simply want people to think for themselves, not just follow what's easy or convenient." Rob, ever the provocateur, wasn't satisfied. He pressed further, leaning in with a mock sincerity. "Oh, I see. So you're saying it's all about individual thinking? That's very convenient, Carrie. But what about the damage these leaders are doing to our planet, to the marginalized communities, to the vulnerable? Don't you think, as a public figure, you have a moral obligation to do more than just think for yourself?" The audience held its breath, waiting for Carrie's reaction. The question was a heavy one, meant to corner her into admitting some form of guilt, some form of responsibility. But Carrie wasn't backing down. She had been pushed harder in the past, and each time, she had only grown stronger. "I understand the concerns, Rob," she said quietly, her voice never wavering. "But I also believe that people can change. That's something I've learned from my own faith. If we only listen to the voices that tell us what's wrong with the world, we'll never see the possibilities of what's right. I have to believe in hope, not just fear." There was a brief pause. The audience could almost feel the shift in energy. Rob blinked, surprised by her response. This wasn't the confrontation he had expected. He had anticipated her being flustered, defensive, perhaps even apologetic. But instead, Carrie remained as poised as ever. Rob pressed again, though more cautiously now. "So you're saying there's hope for change, even with people who seem, well, hopeless?" Carrie's gaze softened, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes, Rob. I do believe in second chances." The words were simple but powerful. And suddenly, the audience began to shift. There was a palpable sense that Carrie had just flipped the narrative. She wasn't the one on the defensive, Rob was. But the tension didn't stop there. Just as it seemed the conversation was heading into safer waters, Rob unleashed a more personal attack. "And what about your music, Carrie? You've built an empire on country music, a genre known for its strong, conservative values. Yet you come across as someone who's above it all, someone who's immune to the very things that the average person is fighting against. Do you think your music is still relevant in today's world?" The question hit hard, but Carrie's response was swift and decisive. "Music, Rob, is for everyone. It's not about politics, it's about stories, feelings, and experiences. You might want to box people into categories based on their political views, but I don't work that way. My fans don't work that way." As the words left her lips, there was a brief, stunned silence in the studio. Carrie had managed to not only deflect Rob's attack but to turn it back on him. Her response wasn't just an answer, it was a statement. Rob, for the first time in the conversation, looked momentarily off balance. The power dynamic had shifted. The audience, sensing the tide turning, began to murmur amongst themselves. Carrie Underwood was not just holding her own, she was dominating the conversation. Rob, realizing he had been outmaneuvered, quickly tried to regain control. But the once smug look on his face had faded. The tension was still thick, but it was clear, Carrie had the upper hand now. The tension in the studio reached its boiling point as Rob Malone, now visibly rattled by Carrie's calm and collected responses, tried once more to reclaim the narrative. The audience, hanging on every word, could sense that the next few moments would decide everything. Carrie, however, seemed utterly unbothered. She was no longer simply defending herself, she was taking control of the situation. Rob leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "Carrie," he began, trying to reassert his dominant position, "you speak of hope, you speak of second chances, but don't you see? These politicians you support are ripping apart the fabric of this country. How do you reconcile that with the very ideals of kindness and generosity that you've built your career on?" Carrie's gaze remained steady, piercing. The question, though pointed, had nothing on her previous experiences. She had endured harsher scrutiny, and this was just another moment to rise above. "You know, Rob," she replied, her voice calm but firm, "I've been asked to reconcile my beliefs with the views of others for as long as I can remember. And what I've learned through it all is that we have to make our choices based on what we believe will make the world a better place, not just what's popular or easy. If I believed what I do because it was the right thing to do in the eyes of a few, then I wouldn't be true to myself. I wouldn't be able to look in the mirror." The audience, sensing the shift, began murmuring approval. There was something undeniably powerful about Carrie's calm demeanor, the way she had refused to be baited into a shouting match. Rob's next words were an attempt to regain his footing, but they seemed hollow now, as if he could no longer see her as just a country singer, but as a formidable opponent. "But don't you think, Carrie," he pressed, "that your continued support for these people who perpetuate hate and division sends a dangerous message? You're telling your fans that it's okay to follow blindly, to believe without questioning the consequences." Carrie stood up slightly, leaning into the table, her voice clear as it sliced through the studio. "I'm telling my fans to think for themselves. I'm telling them that their beliefs matter, that they don't have to follow the status quo. If you think that's promoting hate, then maybe you need to rethink what hate really is." The silence that followed was deafening. Rob blinked, caught off guard by the clarity in Carrie's words. His prepared comeback stuck in his throat. For a moment, it seemed as though he wasn't sure how to proceed. The shift in the room was palpable. The audience had witnessed something rare. It wasn't just an interview. It was a masterclass in how to handle the most uncomfortable questions with grace, poise, and unshakable resolve. The clock on the wall ticked away the final moments of the segment. Rob, seeing the writing on the wall, turned to the audience with a strained smile. "Well," he began, "I think we've learned that Carrie Underwood is not someone who will back down." There was an uncomfortable pause before he added, "And perhaps we've also learned that, sometimes, it's not about agreeing, but about understanding each other's perspectives." Carrie nodded, but didn't respond immediately. The tension was still in the air, but the power had shifted. With one final look at Rob, she stood up from her seat and addressed the audience. "At the end of the day, this is what I believe," she said, her voice ringing clear and confident. "We can disagree, we can argue, but we cannot lose our humanity in the process. It's about kindness. It's about respect. And it's about standing up for what you believe in, even when it's not the easiest thing to do." The crowd erupted in applause. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire studio had held its breath. But as Carrie walked off the stage, the applause only grew louder. The message was clear. In the face of provocation, she had stood her ground, and in doing so, she had gained something far more valuable than a moment of victory. She had earned the respect of those who had witnessed her strength. Rob, his smile now absent, watched as Carrie exited the stage. There was no smugness left in him, no attempt to salvage the interview with a final, biting remark. Instead, he seemed to reflect on what had just transpired. Carrie had outsmarted him, outclassed him, and most importantly, she had turned his own tactics against him. The final seconds of the show passed in a blur as Rob gave his closing remarks, but no one was really listening to him anymore. The show had ended, but the impact of the conversation would last far longer. On social media, clips of the interview began to go viral. The hashtag Carrie Clapback quickly trended, as fans flooded online platforms to praise her ability to rise above the attack and deflect every attempt to undermine her. People across the globe hailed her as a hero of grace under pressure. News outlets quickly picked up on the viral moments, and soon enough, the story of how Carrie Underwood had turned the tables on one of the most notorious talk show hosts in the business was everywhere. She had faced the storm and emerged not just unscathed, but more powerful than ever. Carrie Underwood had truly proved that sometimes the best way to handle confrontation is with a smile, a steady voice, and an unwavering belief in what's right. And with that, she had created a moment for the ages. As the applause continued to echo through the studio, it was clear that Carrie Underwood had not just survived Rob Malone's confrontation, she had triumphed in a way that transcended the boundaries of a typical interview. It wasn't about winning the argument, it was about winning respect, proving that grace and conviction can outshine even the most aggressive attempts to provoke. The lesson was simple, yet profound. Strength doesn't always have to come in the form of loud words or explosive actions. Sometimes, it's about holding your ground with poise and letting your actions speak louder than anything else. Carrie's calm demeanor had shown that true power comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. Her refusal to back down, her unwavering commitment to her beliefs, and her insistence on maintaining her humanity in the face of scorn spoke volumes about the kind of person she was, not just as a performer, but as a leader. In a world that often seems to favor division, she had stood firm in her belief that kindness and respect should always be prioritized, no matter the situation. The interview had become more than a clash of ideas. It had become a moment of self-reflection for all who watched. Rob Malone, for all his bravado, had been forced to confront a hard truth, that it wasn't enough to push people to the edge and expect them to break. Some people, like Carrie, would simply stand tall and face the storm with grace. For the millions watching, Carrie's words would linger long after the show had ended. We can disagree, we can argue, but we cannot lose our humanity in the process. That simple but powerful message would resonate with people everywhere, encouraging them to rise above their own struggles, to stand firm in their beliefs, and to always lead with respect. As the viral clips flooded social media, the hashtag Carrie Clapback became a rallying cry for those who believed in the power of kindness and self-respect. The image of Carrie Underwood standing tall on that stage, her voice unwavering in the face of provocation, was one that would inspire countless people for years to come. Carrie had proven that it's not about being right or winning every battle, it's about how you carry yourself in the midst of adversity. And that, above all else, was her victory. When faced with a situation meant to challenge her, she had not only held her own, she had elevated the conversation. The world had seen her true character, a woman who would never compromise her integrity, no matter the pressure. In the end, it wasn't the clash that defined her, it was the grace with which she handled it, the message of respect and understanding that she left behind. Carrie Underwood had not only earned the admiration of millions that night, she had given the world something far more precious, a reminder that no matter how hard life may try to tear you down, your strength, your kindness, and your principles will always lift you back up.